Right, so we just started recording. Ari, would you mind going ahead and introducing yourself?
Dealing with some echoing that's make it very difficult to hear.
Let's see. Is this any better? Can you hear me?
I can hear you, but I'm hearing you like 3 times.
Okay.
Hold on 1 second.
Lillian, we aren't having that issue, so I don't know if that may be specific for Ari.
So Ari, I think we have the transcript on, so that may help to clarify what I'm saying. But if you could go ahead and maybe introduce yourself, name, pronouns, tell us a little bit about yourself, that'd be great.
So my name is Ari Wilson, and I am a trans queer person who is currently in Northwest Louisiana. I have been working with the nonprofit, the YWCA, as a programming coordinator, and I'm really excited to be with everyone today.
Thanks so much, Ari. Izzy, would you mind introducing yourself?
Sure, can everyone hear me okay?
I can
All right,
hear you
great.
from my end.
Isaac, but I prefer Izzy. I don't have any pronouns, but formally I do, he, she, and they. And I'm a community advocate, and I'm just back here from last year, participating in the panel, and be here to see Lillian again and to provide whatever insight I can provide. And glad to be here.
Thanks so much, Izzy. For those of you who may have not attended our conference last year, Izzy was a part of our, I believe, self-determination, independence, and empowerment panel. So we asked them to come back this year because they were such a great speaker. So Ezra, would you mind introducing yourself next?
Yeah, hey there. My name is Ezra. I use they, them pronouns. I live in California, and I am a queer and disability rights activist.
Thanks so much, Ezra. We're so excited to have this panel today. And so our first question for you guys are, does your experience of disability impact your experience of being an LGBT person? Ari, since you introduced yourself first, would you mind going first?
Yeah, so for me, I think impacted my identity as both a disabled and a queer person. I use they, them pronouns, by the way. I realized I didn't say that. Has really been just the intersection between interacting with both my disability community and my queer community. I've noticed that not all queer communities tend to be completely accessible to me, whether that's a bar that's on an upper floor and doesn't have an elevator or whatever that might be. But then not all disability communities have been so it's kind of an interesting mixture to see.
Hey, Ari, you're cutting in and out. I think it may be your headset.
Okay.
So in the meantime, Izzy, do you want to take a shot at the question?
Sure, pretty much. You hear me? All right.
You are breaking up. Yes. Okay. So as we work through some technical difficulties, maybe Ezra, let's see if your connection is good.
Yeah, let's see if it works. But yeah, I just really echo what, at least I was able to hear what Ari was saying, in how they were saying that a lot of queer spaces are not accessible. I was just at San Diego Pride last weekend, and that was really difficult. I was there tabling for an org that I am a part of, and I had a really hard time just even getting to the table. It was all the way in the back, and I had to, it took me about an hour to walk down there, and there was no way to get like a golf cart or anything. And I think Lily and I shared this with you earlier. But one of my first experiences and introductions to the queer community was when I was in high school and I was first coming out and trying to find community. And I went to the LGBT Center OC, and the only way I could get up to the center itself, because it was on a second floor, was to take the trash elevator of a restaurant down below. And so that really told me what this community thought of disabled people and how intentional their accessibility was. And so that's been a real driver for my activism as well.
Yeah, it seems like through discussion with all three of you prior, it really echoes, a lot of what I've heard from other people who are also disabled and LGBT in my experience as well. Because in spaces that are meant for people with disabilities, there are not a lot of LGBT people. And in spaces meant for LGBT people, there are not a lot of disabled people. And so it's difficult to navigate that as someone with those dual identities, because who do you look to for guidance, right? Whenever you're young and trying to figure everything out, because your identities don't exist in isolation. They exist all in one person. So Ari, I see you're back. Do you have anything more to add?
I think that's pretty much everything that I had to add for now.
Thanks so much, Ari, and I'm so happy that we can finally hear and see you again. Izzy, are you here now?
Yes, I'm here. Can you hear me?
Yes, okay. It seems like we have everything worked out. And as Bambi put in the chat, if anyone has any questions, just pop them in the Q&A box and we can go through them as we go along. So our next question is more targeted towards gender identity. And some of the discussions that I had with you guys prior, it seems like a lot of us had in common that your LGBT identity being medicalized because of your disability, right? So you go into doctor's visits and it's almost as if you're LGBT because you're disabled, even though those things don't necessarily conflate all the time. Ezra, you want to speak to this first?
Yeah, I'm happy to. I've definitely experienced this, especially as a trans person who has sought medical transition. I have often been met with that I don't need to transition, I need to go to yoga for my disability and things like that. And that when I first came out as trans, one of my parents actually, they really thought that this was just another attention-seeking gimmick, essentially, saying that both that and my disability were an attention-seeking gimmick. And so I have also run into doctors in my medical transition where I have doctors that I see for my disability, not for transition related services, and they will essentially threaten not to treat me for my disability if I go and seek these services to transition. And so that's also just been a big balancing fight and balancing act. So I think that is like my biggest experience and thoughts on it.
Absolutely. Thank you for sharing. It's so funny how those things, while they can be so intersectional and they can, intertwine disability and your LGBT identity, how people almost feel like the disability is the cause of everything, right? I went to a therapist for a while who was really, really convinced that me being non-binary was because I was disabled, and it prevented any further conversations about my LGBT identity because it just wasn't understood in the way that it needed to be. And so it really blocked needed conversations. And I think that probably happens a lot in our community. So Ari, can you speak a little bit to that as well?
Okay. Can you hear me a little better now?
Yes, you're perfect.
Great. Okay. I think I finally worked it out. Okay. Can you repeat the question?
Okay, so we're talking a little bit about how your LGBT identity or gender identity can be medicalized because of your disability.
Yes. Okay. So I think something that I've noticed for myself was actually when I started to seek gender affirming care. Because for a while, for many years, I hadn't done any hormones or surgeries or anything like that as a non-binary person. And so most of the time, I just existed in doctor spaces as a cis person, as just a woman. And it wasn't, I never discussed with my doctors that part of my identity. It just wasn't something I felt they needed to know. And it wasn't something at the time I was comfortable sharing. And I didn't think about the fact that whenever I started hormone therapy, I would have to essentially come out to my doctors every single time I saw them because they would be like, oh, you're taking this. Why are you taking that? And I'd have to be like, well, this is this. And then generally I'd have to explain what being non-binary even was because they might be familiar with a binary trans man, but they weren't familiar with what non-binary meant. So that's kind of been one of the most obvious situations for me, I think.
And I think what a lot of people don't consider about what it would be like to come out to your doctors is that as chronically ill individuals or disabled individuals, you see a lot more doctors on an ongoing basis. And so you form a lot more of a personal relationship with them. And that it's a little bit more personal than your GP that you see once a year to get blood work done. And so it can feel a lot more vulnerable to come out to a medical professional as a chronically ill individual or a disabled individual than maybe if you were an able-bodied individual just going and coming out to your GP that you see once a year. Izzy, do you have any experiences about what it's like to be an LGBT person in the medical system?
Yes, most definitely. I mean, coming into the HIV community because of, well, knowing that having HIV is considered an invisible disability and accepting the fact that it's related to the immune system. That's why it's considered a disability, and just how it is a disability and accepting that, because most times it's not accepted as that. Some people do access disability services being HIV positive or having an AIDS diagnosis. However, most times in the medical field, it's more so embracing, it's more so culturally competent as so far as gender identity, gender expression, and even so far as a disability, because they're very open and supportive of all walk of life. Mainly community health centers because they're catered to the community. So I think that pretty much with the intersection of being LGBT, for me, and then the HIV diagnosis for that intersection. So it kind of like was a progressive, if you will, process of my intersections, but identifying as LGBT first, and then contracting HIV, and then learning about and then accepting it as a disability. Just pretty much those intersections as a whole are pretty much make me up for my experiences to say that, you know, I think that the medical in my experiences in the medical field as well, coming from Open Health and working from the Louisiana Department of Health, that are very culturally competent and aware and client-centered, if you will, in services. So they're embracing of all types of identities and intersections.
You mentioned, hey Melanie, I see that you have your hand raised. she put her hand down, so I suppose it was an accident. So Izzy, you mentioned identifying as disabled later on. Do you feel like it's less common for people with HIV to identify themselves as disabled?
That's a great question, Lillian. Well, unfortunately, some people do and some people don't. I guess it's, a varying differences. Medically, it is a disability. And just knowing that it is a disability and how it can be a disability, and then knowing how to apply it, if you will, because the stigma on HIV says that a disability is that you can't do this or you can't do that. So therefore, we don't the HIV community is very empowering. So therefore, mentioning disability would be stigmatizing. However, embracing it, that's why I'm saying embracing it as a disability in the disability communities. And understanding that, hey, this is a disability and there are services that you can receive for having a disability, as opposed to, it's not because you can't do anything, because a lot of times I think that the stigma, and then also being in the Bible Belt, is that disability, they associate that with not being able, and that doesn't necessarily mean that. And I think that's just the stigma, really. But however, just embracing it and coming to know it as personally, because it has impacted me. When I wasn't able to work, I was disabled. I'm disabled, and now I realize how disabled I am, and even applying for work. Just speaking from my personal experiences, I check off the disability box. Does that impact my employment or not? But I check it off. You know, but those are just from my personal experiences, knowing that how to do it. And the people from their own experiences can tell you, well, I could choose, or how can I get disability, like insurance payment, something like that. That they'll try to see how to get that related to their status, health status, and that's how they'll consider it a disability. But so far as being able to do other things, they may not look at it because of the stigma. And then the stigma around HIV just is perpetuated because of other things. But that's just another thing to consider, the fact that ability or disability, why is that? Why is it looked at as, why is it so stigmatizing even for people living with HIV?
I think you bring up a really good point about, identifying as disabled to access services, but not necessarily in everyday life. And it's so much related to that stigma around disability and this idea that disability is all encompassing, right? So once you become disabled, that's all you are. And it almost lends back to our conversation earlier about, your LGBT identity being medicalized, right? Because it's the assumption that, okay, so you're disabled, so everything else must stem from that disability. While it does intersect, not everything does stem from that disability. Have you guys, Ezra and Ari, seen that same kind of stigma in the chronic illness community about not necessarily wanting to identify as disabled?
Yes. There's for me, it's been a lot of people who are like, oh, am I allowed to call myself disabled? Because I don't know if I hit all the check boxes yet. It's like, how bad does it have to be to identify as disabled? And I think a lot of people get hung up again on that, oh, it's all encompassing thing. Because disability is so dynamic, and especially with chronic illnesses, your energy levels, your pain levels, all that can fluctuate from day to day. So one day you may particularly feel disabled, and then another day is you feel like just any average person who is able-bodied. So I think that is something I've noticed as far as whether or not people identify as disabled.
Absolutely. Ezra, do you have any thoughts on this?
Yeah, definitely. I have many thoughts on this. I spend a lot of time thinking about this. For me, I have noticed it more so show up as folks saying that you're differently abled or you're handy capable, or other euphemisms like that. And for me, and I know that we're going to talk about this in a minute, but I find true, like real empowerment from calling myself disabled and owning that fully. And I know that that is different for everyone, and that is everyone's own individual identity and journey. But for me, calling myself disabled and really owning that, because that is my reality. And what I have noticed is in the past, you know, when I was younger and first had the onset of my chronic illness, a lot of people didn't believe me. They didn't believe that I was disabled. Like Ari was saying, I didn't check off enough boxes. And so for me now, especially, it is really empowering and just my way of working through the journey to own that. And I've also seen that there are almost sides of this chronic illness community where some people think it's okay to call yourself disabled, and some people think it's essentially like internalized ableism. And so just navigating and balancing that, and also respecting that everyone has their own right to identify however they want, and self-determination is where it's all at. Like that's the bottom line. So I noticed that a lot, and I noticed that there is sort of a lack of respect for everyone's self-determination.
Absolutely. And Ari, you mentioned earlier how there's many people, and Ezra, you echoed the sentiment as well, about how there's many people who don't know if they check all the boxes to be disabled. And there's that similar phenomenon in the LGBT community, specifically among, non-binary people, where it's like, can I really claim the term trans, right? Do I tick enough boxes to claim the term trans? But it's really about that self-determination and empowerment that labels can actually provide, where you can communicate to the outside world a little bit better what your internal experience is. So I think our next question is pretty kind of related. So if you have an invisible disability, are the experiences of coming out as LGBT similar as your experiences as disclosing your disability? Ezra, do you want to go first?
Sure. I have a bit of a dynamic disability in both how I experience it and how visible it is. So I've been a full-time wheelchair user. I have used no mobility aids, and currently I mostly use forearm crutches, though not all the time, and sometimes still my wheelchair. I had a kind of odd experience this semester just going to classes, and we started for the first week on Zoom, and then of course you can't see any of the disabled like indicators in Zoom. So my professor, she asked me on the first day that we were in person, what happened to you? And I told her, this is just my norm. And then she emailed me actually. She was like, I realized that was a bit of ableist thinking, that obviously didn't mean that something happened, that some people just use mobility aids, but it is something I think about a lot in any kind of professional setting. I am currently about to graduate college, and just thinking about what I want to do with my life, and it is really scary for me to be like, I am disabled and I need these accommodations, and I need these I have these access needs. Because oftentimes those are not respected, or it's seen as a weakness, or it's seen as that I am unable because I have accommodations. So there's definitely still that fear, and just fear of rejection, that I think is very similar to that core feeling of coming out as queer.
Absolutely. Like anytime you disclose something personal about yourself, like details about your disability or chronic illness or LGBT identity, you're putting yourself in a vulnerable place, but in a way you're also in that role of educator. So it's this really strange place to be, where you're the vulnerable one disclosing something personal about yourself, but you're also the one who may have the information that the other person does not have. And so that's also a really vulnerable place to be, because there's that burden of representing your community well on whatever front that you're trying to describe. Ari, what are your thoughts on this?
I feel like my background growing up in very evangelical conservative Christianity really impacted the way that I came out both as a queer person and as a disabled person. I knew I was not straight and cis when I was probably like 10 to 12. But I also grew up hearing that that was very much not an acceptable way to be. And so there was a lot of hiding and trying to make sure no one figured it out. But then when I started getting really sick around 14 or 15, at first I was like, oh, I'm sick, that's fine. But then people started noticing that I wasn't getting better. And people were seeing me using mobility aids or braces, that kind of stuff. And there was always this reaction of, oh, let me pray for you. Let me fix this for you. And it's very hard to get people to understand that some things aren't fixable and not all illness is acute. And there was also this underlying theme in a lot of sermons that I heard, that God will heal you if you have enough faith. And so this idea that I was not going to be healed gave me the impression that other people thought, oh, I just don't have enough faith, and that they wanted to help save me from being ill. And so I think I felt a lot of shame around being sick, just the same as I did being queer, because of that background of religion and prosperity gospel type of ideology.
And it seems like there's a similar narrative around being LGBT in your more conservative Christian circles of you just need to be saved, right? It's something to be fixed rather than just a neutral part of your identity that just is. Like disability it can be a neutral thing. It's not necessarily a good or a bad thing. It can just be the way that your body naturally functions in the world. And the same goes for your LGBT identity. So thank you for sharing that, Ari. Izzy, would you like to go next?
Yes, I can speak, and I'm going to speak for myself because I know that I'm speaking to an advantage because I know, I mean, I identify as Black, and I know a lot of Black individuals may not have had that same advantages that I've had because I grew up in the military. I was around different cultures. And then when I came to New Orleans, it was different for me. It was much different for me coming into the culture. So I could speak from a different experience from that, and then associating into the Black community was much different for me. However, I can say for the Black community as a whole, coming out is not easy. And it's not easy because of the religious aspect as we share, because we are in the South. So I think we all can agree on that. It's not easy to come out, for anyone. I don't think I don't think it's easy to come out for anyone, just being a human being, emotionally and mentally, and then not to mention behaviorally. But definitely it's hard. It was hard. And then definitely transitioning with the stigma of HIV was definitely hard as well. So I think that with that just coming out as a whole is just a whole another, it's another weight, it's another process, because it takes us time to come out. It takes us, sometimes some of us don't even come out. We deal with it in our own ways that we're comfortable with, and we're comfortable with it. We come out in our own ways. We don't have to come out to everybody. We already came out to ourselves in our own private, space, or to maybe a couple of people, or we don't even say it, but I think that it's a difficult process, and no one should be forced to come out, and I think that anyone can do what they please to do as long as it has good morals to it, so far as like being good or bad, and I know that might be controversial so far as good or bad, but I think that just pretty much love is love, but coming out that's definitely a process. It's a weight, and and it's not easy for anyone. So I mean, however I just think that we all can agree that whatever we lived or however we came about it, and some of us, haven't even made it to come out. So with respect to the individuals that with the mental health, that killed themselves because they couldn't bear the issues of having to tell someone who they are and to be themselves. A lot of times, families reject us because or we run away, or families reject us because we got to come out, or every time we meet a new family member, we have to come out. you know, or meet a new family member coming, somebody getting married into the family. We have to come out, and that's like having to come out all over again, you know. So it's just something that we have to, it's a process that we have to cope with. You know, we have all have skills and talents that we can utilize to cope, you know, and there's resources to help us. But, you know, I mean, just the fact that we have to go through it each time that we have to go through it, whenever we have to go through it, you know, it just takes a lot, and that's why there's pride. You know, that's why there's pride for us, because we need to be prideful of who we are, not down about who we are. You know, I'm not gonna keep going on and on, Lillian.
I think you bring up a lot of good points, especially about how that's why we have pride, because coming out can be such a almost a burdensome experience at times, but pride gives that outlet of just celebrating your identity without necessarily that opportunity for judgment from other people. And I think you also bring up another really good point that a lot of people don't think about, is that some people choose not to come out because it can be such a process, and it's a lifelong process with whoever you meet, in whatever setting you're in. And it's okay to choose not to come out. And I would assume that a lot of people with disabilities who are also LGBT probably, I would almost assume, come out less because of the energy demands, right? Because coming out is an energy demanding and emotionally demanding process. And already, whenever you're chronically ill or disabled, you've got a lot on your plate, and it can be very energy demanding and emotionally demanding. So to balance all these different parts of yourself can be nearly impossible sometimes. So Ezra, Ari, do you have anything to add to this discussion before we move on to the next question?
The only thing that I would add, just like going off of that point, that I do think that likely queer disabled people come out less, is also that a lot of disabled people rely on their closest family members, friends for caregiving needs, for literal survival. And a lot of the time, unfortunately, caregiving for disabled people comes down to if they're liked or not, if they're accepted or not. So I just really echo that. And I also think that that has a big part of it, that caregiving needs, and just that interdependence makes it really risky for some queer people to come out.
I think you bring up a really good point, because as I was growing up as a young LGBT person, I know you guys have seen the advice of like, don't come out to your family if you have the risk of being kicked out, right? But then that begs the question of, okay, so if you're a disabled person who is reliant on your family, what happens then? How do you live out your LGBT identity in an authentic way and still access those caregiving, those needs and those accommodations that you require? So Ari, I see you nodding along. What are your thoughts on this?
Yeah, that's something I hadn't even thought about, I guess, in years, but it was definitely a huge factor in me not coming out for all of college to my family, because I didn't know how it was going to be accepted. And I was trying to make it through college, and I was working as I could, but I couldn't hold down as high paying of a job as some of my peers could, because I didn't have the ability to do both schoolwork and a demanding job. So I was relying a lot on my family for financial support, and I was really privileged to be able to do that. But it did mean that there was this constant feeling of kind of walking on eggshells, because I had to make sure that I was behaving and acting in a way that was acceptable enough to particularly my dad, to deserve the help. So.
And this issue probably also comes up with paid caregivers as well. Because I know here in Louisiana, we have a huge shortage of direct support workers to work with people with disabilities. But what happens if you're an LGBT person who needs to hire a direct support worker, needs your identity respected, but you can't find a good quality support worker that is accepting or understanding of an LGBT identity? Because already you're getting such personal care from caregivers, right? So you need someone who's respectful of you. But how do you find that in Southern Louisiana whenever you're already have a shortage of just workers in general? That's going to be a huge barrier. And this kind of leads us to our next question of empowerment. So for y'all, what does empowerment look like? Ezra, would you like to go first?
Sure. And I know that I spoke on this a little bit, just about how claiming that disability label, I guess, is a source of empowerment, but also queer love is a source of empowerment, and in particular, trans love is a real big source of empowerment for me. I've been with my current partner for 3 years now, and they're just my soulmate and the love of my life and my caregiver. And then also, it's not even about just romantic love, though. Like, I feel so empowered when I can hang out with a group of my queer friends and just feel so seen, so heard, and so loved. Like that, there's just nothing that compares. And then the other thing I think that really gives me empowerment is just expression, whether that be writing, art, even just like gender expression, clothes, makeup, things like that. And I really think that those things give me empowerment because they are all the things that I was told I would never have, that I would never have acceptance and just wholeness as a disabled person without having to kind of hide that disabled aspect, and love as a queer person in so many different forms, and just safety and a home. And so I don't know, I think that that's why it is so empowering for me, and also what really drives me in my activism, because I want other kids to have that from a very, very young age, but ultimately I do want everyone to have that.
I love that. Thank you for sharing. I got goosebumps. Izzy, would you like to go next?
I like that. Thank you so much. I feel empowered by that. Love is love, and you share different aspects of love. But yeah, so what I just wanted to say was I feel like empowerment for me is self-love, and but for the HIV community, HIV empowerment is definitely something that's anticipated care and support, and something that's positive, something that's going to build, something that's reassuring. That's what I feel like for the HIV community is empowerment, because of the fluctuation. Like we say, HIV brings along a different comorbidities. So it does fluctuate. Like I think it was Ezra was saying that some days, I'm down, some days I'm up. That's another comorbidity of depression, and then my anxiety gets bad sometimes, so I just want to say, just constant reminders and positive reinforcement because of the stigma, and then being non-binary as well, similar to being trans, we have the same layer of thought processes, and very similar. Just I think that reassurance and love is empowerment.
I love what you said about loving yourself as well, because that's such a huge component of allowing other people to love you, is really allowing yourself to be unfiltered and showing who you are, right? So, Ari, would you like to go next?
I took the words right out of my mouth, but I have I think had different relationships with the idea of empowerment throughout the years of accepting myself, especially as a disabled person, because for whatever reason, it was really easy for me to accept myself as a non-binary and as bisexual. But accepting myself as disabled was a lot more of a difficult process, and it's something I'm still working on because of part the cultural importance that's put on independence, but also my own importance of that I put on independence, because that was always something that I strove for and really desired in my life. And so I think something that has been really empowering is actually learning how to reframe those aspects of myself that weren't exactly what I pictured as a child being like when I'm and so allowing myself to have the grace to exist as I need to, instead of pushing myself to fit inside this box of what I believe society or my family wants from me. So I think that has been a really empowering experiences, much along the lines of self-love, is just really learning to accept myself for who I am.
I love what you said about accepting yourself where you're at, right? Because I mean, so many disabled people or so many LGBT people aren't necessarily at a place of full empowerment yet, but that's okay too, because it's such a journey. And it's funny because you had mentioned how accepting yourself as LGBT was easier than accepting yourself as disabled. And my experience was completely opposite, right? But I've almost been able to use my acceptance of my disability as a roadmap to accepting myself as LGBT, right? Because there's so many intersections between having to disclose information or figuring out, you know, what you will tolerate from your family and friends as far as, okay, what are you willing as far as education, what are you willing to provide, and how patient are you going to be? So it's really funny to hear how different people have different ways of accepting themselves, but it's so useful because I think we can all use each other's journeys as a roadmap almost. So our last question is, what do you want people to know about being both disabled and LGBT? Izzy, do you want to go first? Izzy, I think you're on mute. Perhaps they're having some technical difficulties. So Ezra, do you want to take a shot at it?
Yeah, happy to. First, just thank you for this whole panel, and to you, Izzy and Ari. You're both so insightful. I think that what I really want people to know is that there is never going to be like the top 3 things that like everyone needs to know, that you'd really need to just ask the queer and disabled person, because I think what I have really been sitting with throughout this last 45 minutes is just how individualistic and beautiful everyone's journeys are. That everyone has their own journey and their own needs and their own, how they need to be supported and affirmed. And so I think that really taking this opportunity and being like, all right, let me listen to some more stories. Let me listen to some more voices and some more journeys, I think is what I would really want people to know, and how valuable that can be and how important. And also that it's really the only way to know like what it's like to be a queer and disabled person, because there's no formulaic answer to that. It's whatever the person sitting in front of you is experiencing.
I think you bring up such a good point of everything being so individual, because I know in our disability community, we talk a lot about, you know, individualizing care, but that's not, I haven't seen as much of discussion about that in your LGBT communities, about individualizing those supports and what affirmations you need. And it's funny because both the disability community and LGBT community both need unique supports that other people may not expect. But it's so individualized and so important. So Ari, what are your thoughts on this? What do you want people to know about being both LGBT and disabled?
I think I would really love for people to understand that being LGBTQ doesn't have to be hypersexualized, and being disabled doesn't have to be desexualized.
Yes.
Because that's something I've noticed a lot in whether it's media or just narratives around being queer and disabled. The queer aspect of my identity, especially as someone who tends to look more feminine, is very hypersexualized and fetishized. Whereas when I disclose that I'm disabled, that tends to, people have questions about how I even am a sexual person. And so I think if more people understood that those 2 identities don't have to be opposite ends of the spectrum, and that everyone, again, is individual and is in their own space, I think is something that would be really important to me.
Absolutely. And I wonder how many disabled people too as well don't even know they're LGBT yet because that sex ed isn't in place, because we already know that people with disabilities are less likely to receive adequate sex ed. And we know sex ed isn't necessarily inclusive of LGBT identities a lot of the time. So I wonder how many disabled people just don't know who they are because they haven't had an adequate education about the possibilities of diversity and what diversity can look like. So Izzy, what are your thoughts on this?
Thank you, Lillian. I'm sorry about that earlier when you called my name. But no, I just want everyone to know that you know, you never know what anyone's going through. You know, to be honest with you, we all have invisible disabilities, and it's just, you know, you never know what someone's going through. You know, so you got to be open minded and helpful. And racism is real, and we could definitely use a lot of allies against that, and on the policy level as well, and even in the HIV community, it's not as stigmatizing as people believe it to believe. I've been living with HIV 17 years. It's not as once the death sentence that it was, but I still have my barriers that I'm thriving. However, hey, it's not what it used to be.
Thank you so much, Izzy. We have 3 comments in our Q&A section. No questions, but some really amazing comments. So if anyone has any questions, please pop them in there quickly before we close our session. But Jennifer says, the comment about coming out to caregivers who are not relatives is so important. When your circle of supports doesn't always include family members who have unconditional love for you, then that adds another complication or personal risk. Christy says, I just wanted to give a special shout out to Izzy and say I'm super proud of you. I worked as your case manager over 10 years ago, and I'm so glad you were a mover and a shaker in the field. And I know you would do great things and become an inspiration to others. Keep up the awesome work. Julie says, thank you so much for sharing with us. It's so important that we have discussions like this. According to MAP, Movement Advancement Projects, 3 to 5 million LGBT individuals have disabilities, which is a pretty startling statistic, but a really important point. So thank you, Julie, for that. And that essentially concludes our panel. So I just wanted to give a big thank you to Ezra, Ari, and Izzy for being a part of our panel and sharing their experiences. And thank you to everyone who attended and joined and listened and engaged. I really enjoyed it. So thank you guys.
Thank you so much.
Yeah, thank you, Lillian.
Thank you, Lillian and Ari and Ezra.
Thanks, everyone. We'll be back for our next session at 12:30.